So, good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Rolon Fry from the Community Resource Center. And on behalf of the CRC, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our home. And we are so happy that you all can make it today. It's such a great turnout. So round of applause for all of you. So before we dive in, I want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to our partners who make this event possible. On behalf of, a big thank you and to the League of Women Voters of Mamaroneck and Larchmont for their dedicated civic engagement. I also like to thank Jeffrey Feinbloom law firm for their generous support and always supporting CRC and our immigration legal program. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being here. And our immigration attorney, Berta Rodriguez, for her leadership in defending our immigrant community. Unfortunately, she fell ill and she had to go home. She feels so bad about it, but she knows that you understand that she couldn't stay here today. So Jeffrey will be the one who will do the panel, and I can support from the advocacy standpoint and also from CRC if there are questions about what we do and how we're doing our work right now. CRC has a mission to empower immigrants and low-income families by providing the resources and the advocacy to help them become self-reliant and thriving members of the community. During the past 6 months, we have witnessed a wave of immigration policies that are not only harsh, they are inhumane and harmful. Mass deportations are tearing families apart. Asylum seekers are being turned away at our borders. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants have lost temporary protection status and humanitarian parole. Immigrants are being arrested inside and outside immigration courts and ICE check-ins. Legal immigration pathways have been narrowed, delayed, and denied through a new vetting system that disproportionately affects those seeking refuge and opportunity. We cannot allow fear to replace fairness. Immigrants are not a burden. They are builders. They are the hands that harvest our food, the minds that drive innovation, and the hearts that keep our community diverse and vibrant. They are our neighbors, our classmates, our co-workers, and our friends. To every immigrant living in fear right now, you're not alone. We see you, we stand with you, and we will not stop fighting for a future where your dreams are not deferred but defended. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Jeffrey for sharing your knowledge, experience, and all what's going on right now. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Luis from the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Janet. Okay. Bienvenido a todos. Okay, I'm Louise Perez, and my co-president, Beth Radow, is here. We're co-presidents of the Larchmont Mamaroneck League of Women Voters. Tonight we have been welcomed at the newly renovated CRC. This is a joint program tonight between the League and CRC. And we are very grateful for all the support and cooperation we have had with you folks at CRC, Janet, Kevin, Citalina, Gonzalo, you've been great. And it's thanks to them that we're here tonight in this beautiful renovated space. Okay. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We don't support candidates running for office, nor political parties. But we do study and speak out on public policy issues, and our goal is to educate voters. We are pro-democracy. We are doing this program because it is clear that immigrants, particularly Hispanic immigrants, are on the front lines in preserving our values and our democracy. We have witnessed on the news that immigrants are being arrested and deported by ICE agents without due process, with the Trump administration ignoring legal rights and defying court orders whenever they can. We are here to learn what our neighbors are experiencing, and we have a fantastic immigration attorney on our panel to explain the current legal situation. We hope to conclude tonight's program with actions that we citizens and non-citizens can take in the fight for democracy here in the United States. Okay, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Feinbloom, who's on the panel. Jeffrey is the founding partner of Feinbloom Bertish LLP, a boutique immigration and nationality law firm with offices in Manhattan and Westchester County. He's a graduate of Northwestern University and the Benjamin and Cardozo School of Law. Mr. Feinbloom is a nationally recognized expert on U.S. immigration law and has over 29 years of experience practicing in the field. His firm specializes in both business and family-based immigration, as well as naturalization, removal defense, and federal court litigation. Throughout his long and distinguished career, his firm has successfully represented countless individuals and businesses before United States government agencies and the federal courts, with multiple published decisions to his credit. His clients include both well-established and emerging companies, particularly in the technology sector, foreign national investors, employees, students, and intending immigrants, and individuals sponsoring family members. In 2021, Mr. Feinbloom won a landmark victory before the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, reestablishing the doctrine of equitable estoppel in immigration cases and securing a six-figure fee award for his client. From 2006 to 2009, he was deeply engaged in the successful litigation, media, and lobbying campaign that ended the widow penalty and resulted in Congress enacting benefits for surviving relatives. For a decade, he served as adjunct professor at the City University of New York, teaching classes on immigration law and naturalization. He has served as a panelist and moderator at numerous legal conferences and has been a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association since 1997. Jeffrey lives in Mamaroneck with his wife and 3 children and their sheepdoodle. So he's been admitted to, various bars.
Courts.
The Supreme Court of the United States in 2009, and several United States Court of Appeals, and United States District Courts, and the state of New York. Okay, so I'm going to turn things over to Jeffrey.
Fire away.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. everybody. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be associated with the Community Resource Center. When I first moved to town, I heard about this organization, and they are wonderful people doing incredible work, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. But really tonight, we're all here because we're concerned about what's happening to our immigrant community. And I am here to answer some questions that that you guys have. I'm happy to talk about, what I'm seeing out there, what people could do. It's a scary time, and now more than ever, it's super important to be as vigilant as possible and to not lose hope, because that's really all we have right now. And I really do believe that this too shall pass. And I think the pendulum will swing back the other way, as historically it has. I mean, nowadays nothing can be known or taken for granted, but hopefully in another 3.5 years we'll have relief, and there'll be a more law-abiding administration in power, enacting more humane and lawful policies. So with that, my understanding was there were going to be some questions, and I'm happy to address them.
These are questions that came to mind, but certainly we will be able to take questions from the audience as well. But just to get started, what advice do you give to clients that don't have legal status? Should they start the process in immigration court or stay in the shadows for now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question, it's a good question, it's a difficult question, and I think the answer is it's a case-by-case situation. What an individual without status should do is speak with a trusted and experienced lawyer and get some threshold legal advice about their situation. It's fine to be, on social media, reading newspapers, talking to people in your community, but it's not fine if that's your source of legal advice. People need to network as much as possible through their local communities, trusted advisors, whether it be their family, friends, church, synagogue, mosque. Speak to an experienced immigration lawyer and do an initial consultation. And I've often said some of the best advice I could give people is, I can't help you. And that's okay, because at least that person now has the knowledge that their situation is difficult, and maybe they're not going to be taken advantage of an unscrupulous attorney or notario or community member, which unfortunately in immigrant communities happens more than we'd like to acknowledge. So just knowing what your situation is, and knowledge, information is power, and having that, even if you do not have a path to legal residency, knowing that for sure is at least something. But again, it's a case-by-case situation, and there are situations for sure where I tell people to, lay low, don't do anything, be vigilant, and then there are other situations where I'll say, okay, you could pursue option A or option B. Here is the upside, here are the downside, here are the risks, that sort of thing.
Good. Okay. I think you've already answered my second question. But what is the best path to gain legal status for those without it? Can you go a little deeper into that? Or?
Yeah. I mean, really, under our immigration system, fundamentally, there are two ways, and I'll say 2+ ways, okay? So there's family ties and employment. Those foundationally are the 2 ways to qualify for legal status. There's also the refugee and asylum system, which is, presently under massive assault. In fact, it's been under assault in quieter ways for the better part of 20 years through decisions from the Board of Immigration Appeals, whittling away the rights of asylum applicants. But right now, it's just an unabridged assault. So there's family, business, and asylum. And just in terms of what people could do, again, have a consultation with an immigration attorney so you could explore whatever options you have in those various areas.
Okay. Now, people that have work visas, are they being easily renewed? As well as student visas, too. Are they being renewed?
Sure. So the short answer to that question is yes. But these are unprecedented times even for those with legal status, even for those with strong cases, for people who have gotten visas and want to get them renewed. And I'll distinguish between people here on work visas and students. One of the biggest blow-ups as an immigration lawyer on my listserv in the last 5 months happened in April when the Trump administration sent a notice to students who were lawfully in status at schools saying, your SEVIS record, which SEVIS is the interagency database that manages the student and exchange visitor visa programs, your registration is being terminated. I don't want to get too off topic, but that sent shockwaves through immigrant communities, universities, and it's just part of what's going on. But I mention that because it's illustrative of what's happening right now, that even people that are perfectly within, they're doing everything they can, they have a valid student visa, they're studying, they haven't violated their status, maybe they had a ticket or an arrest from years ago that they disclosed to consular officials before they got their visas, and then they were sent these notices. By and large, the renewals are taking place. There are, in a certain respect, it's business as usual, but in another respect, there's a lot more uncertainty. I am advising clients differently when it comes to leaving the United States and renewing visas abroad. Like most people that have visas, they file for extensions within the United States. It's paperwork, you submit the extension, hopefully you do it properly, you have a good case, and 9 times out of 10 or more, it's going to get approved. But if you have to leave the United States, if you have a business obligation or a family obligation, or you just want to have a vacation, and if you then also need to renew your visa before a consular officer in order to re-enter the United States, there's an enhanced risk nowadays, and particularly in the student visa programs where they very recently announced enhanced vetting. They're looking at people's social media profiles, that sort of thing. So I'm much more circumspect about the advice I give to clients when it comes to travel abroad. And I hate doing that because I'm an optimist by nature, and I feel like if you have a good case, and then hey, no problem. But that would be irresponsible, in this environment.
Wow. And for DACA recipients, what is the current state of affairs?
Yeah. So as far as I know, in my experience, and just tangentially, because I do not see a lot of email traffic on my various listservs about DACA, believe it or not, these are being renewed relatively easily and relatively quickly. There are a bunch of court decisions that have already occurred. There are some in the pipeline that will ultimately determine the fate of the program. But right now, in effect, if you have DACA, you can renew it. If you haven't applied for DACA, technically you could apply, but those applications are probably going to be given quite a bit of scrutiny. I mean, there aren't that many people who qualify for DACA and haven't yet applied for it. But travel authorizations, which could trigger a path to permanent residence, are generally not being approved for DACA recipients. In extreme cases, if you have a serious emergency, you should try. And if it gets approved, if you have a travel authorization, in my opinion, it is then safe to travel and re-enter the United States, so long as you're doing so within the validity period of your travel authorization and within the validity period of your DACA authorization.
Boy, things are complicated. What should non-citizens do if confronted by ICE?
Okay, well, so as far as non-citizens is an extremely broad category. I would break it down to people with legal status and people without legal status. For people with legal status, they should carry proof of their legal status on them in case they get into a situation. For people without legal status, it's much more complicated. And I've done a couple of Know Your Rights presentations with CRC. There are Know Your Rights presentations and conferences and seminars happening probably in most, if not every, community in the United States right now. The best thing that you could do is educate yourself. Understand what your rights are. Attend the one or more of these seminars. And of course, if you are undocumented and you have concerns, and if you could afford to have a consultation with not only an immigration lawyer, but really a First Amendment lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, at this stage of the game would almost be a better person to consult with. And there are those among us, and I am not among those, that are experts in both immigration and constitutional law. That would be the gold mine in terms of who to consult with in the present day and age. But specifically, each individual case really has to be analyzed and assessed under the particular facts and circumstances that an individual is faced with, and that would dictate, God forbid, if they're encountered by ICE, what would happen. I will add, as I've mentioned in some of the Know Your Rights presentations, that there is a distinction between encountering an ICE official in public, where you have rights, but they are they are second fiddle to the rights of the ICE officer who holds all the cards, versus if an ICE officer tries to come into your home or your place of business, that's an entirely different matter. If you are undocumented, if there are people in your home that are undocumented and ICE comes to your home, demand to see a warrant, a judicial warrant, which is not an administrative warrant, a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge before permitting access to the home. And particularly in communities like in Westchester and Mamaroneck, where you have local police and law enforcement that are supportive. If you're in a tricky situation, this sounds counterintuitive, but try to avail yourself with local law enforcement if you feel like your rights are being trampled.
Quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you would advise someone to seek out advice from someone who's a First Amendment specialist. Does that have to do with them having, let's say, posted something or published something in a school newspaper? Is that why you're advising that people who may be encountering, difficulties with their student visas, that they should consult with a First Amendment specialist?
Well, someone who has a student visa should consult with an immigration lawyer, and if there are First Amendment issues in that person's profile, they could then consult with a constitutional expert. The specific question that I was asked is, what should someone who is undocumented, what should they do if they're encountered by ICE? So my advice is to be proactive and to understand what your rights are. Like, you could go to an immigration lawyer who could tell you you have a potential pathway to legalization or you do not. That's a much different question as to what should that person do if they're confronted by ICE. So the best advice that I could give is to arm yourself with that knowledge in advance of any potential confrontation, God forbid there is one. And to be clear, the overwhelming majority of immigrants and people in our community are not confronted by ICE, but too many are.
Is that Is that true throughout Westchester, as far as you know?
In terms of people being confronted and detained and arrested?
Yes,
Yeah,
are they vulnerable, yeah.
You know, I know that it's happening. It's happening in our city. There have been some high-profile arrests that we've all heard about, but we don't hear that much about the lower-profile things about, you know, ICE officers parking their car outside of community schools or coming to quote-unquote wellness visits. I think Janet can speak to that better than I can. She has a much better pulse on what's happening in the immigrant community. I know just tangentially that there's been an uptick. I don't know how bad it is out there, but I know it's not great.
Yeah, I mean,
And we want to hear about those stories.
of course. I think it's, so in terms of ICE presence in our community, every day we receive pictures, videos from community members who are, you know, seeing vans park, you know, on the streets, officers, you know, wearing bulletproof vests, also face masks, kind of like trying to hide their identity, you know, are among us, but also in certain locations. For example, we heard a lot of ICE spotting in New Rochelle, just recently in Portchester, and White Plains, Sleepy Hollow, Ossining, and Yonkers. And I think the most ICE presence that we have seen have been in Yonkers and New Rochelle. So every day our community sends us pictures as to, you know, for us to verify if those are really ICE agents or federal, you know, agents, because they are protecting their faces, and it just feels like you don't know whether it's law enforcement or not, and sometimes people, you know, feel like they're being kidnapped. And so there's a lot of fear, you know, for the from the community to go to work or to even just go to the store in their local community. So also their children are, you know, experiencing a lot of anxiety for their parents, especially when they have to talk about family preparedness and how they can't and who can serve as a guard or as a parental designee when one of the parents or both parents are detained. So this. And we went kind of like through same feelings during the first Trump administration, but I think the second administration has been a lot worse, because even families who have ICE check-ins that, like Jeffrey mentioned, they are afraid to be detained right after those check-ins. And we are hearing every day that if a family goes there, make sure that you go with somebody else, so in case you get detained, you know, someone can inform your family member back home, or someone can pick up your kid, you know, from school. I mean, there are so many videos, you know, out there already, because this is happening across the country. It's not just in Westchester, it's in other areas as well. And when we see kids seeing their parents being taken away, it causes a lot of trauma and a lot of fear. And now these kids don't want to go to school. They don't want to participate in their communities. They're concerned about their parents, when they're going to be reunited. So family separation this time, you know, feels so close, because even families who have immigration court hearings are not coming back home, because their cases are getting denied, and Jeffrey can speak more on this, but the moment that they leave immigration court is when they get detained. So even families going through the legal process are being, you know, somehow denied due process or even a chance to present their cases.
Yeah,
so
these are not isolated incidents either. The government has enacted a nationwide policy. They are voluntarily terminating thousands of removal cases for people that have been in the country for less than 2 years, even for people who were lawfully paroled under the prior administration. And they're taking the position that that parole was not lawful. They are taking the position that those people, once their removal proceeding is terminated, which historically is what an immigration lawyer tries to do, if you cannot get someone a green card or legal status, you try to get their proceeding terminated so they can be not under threat of deportation. But what's happening is the agency, DHS, is filing motions to terminate proceedings so that they can then arrest, detain people, and place them under a process known as expedited removal, which is a statutory, lawful process. It's lawful so long as it's being done in compliance with the underlying statute. Right now, it's like the Wild West out there. And, unfortunately, you need a really good, aggressive lawyer, if that happens to you, to get into federal court, file a habeas, take legal action, and if you're in a jurisdiction like New York, chances are you can get relief, but not everyone has, tens of thousands of dollars and access to, a really good federal litigator to help them. And the administration knows this, right? It's the most vulnerable people that are, being victimized. But, to Janet's point, if you are, historically, if you had a hearing, if you had a case in process, you have nothing to worry about, at least when it comes to attending your court hearing. But nowadays, you need to have advice. Am I exposed even by showing up to court?
Yeah, and even, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So basically what you're saying, that if you're an undocumented resident, there is no way now safely to pursue citizenship.
No, I don't. I don't believe that's the case. I just think that the environment is much more hostile. You have to be more vigilant. The amazing thing about all this in the last 5 months is the laws haven't changed much. There's been like one or two things that have gotten through Congress, but it's just the way the law is being applied that's changed. So, it's not even necessarily more difficult now than it was a year ago for an undocumented person. There's just more outside of whatever legal process is available to that person. There's just more risk and uncertainty, if that makes sense.
In all the conversation you hear, on social media or wherever, the question really is, are these people really federal employees? Are they just sort of masked people? Is there any way that our police are in a position to determine, if they're helping us at all, to determine whether these people are legitimately able to be going and even doing what they're doing? Is there any movement in that direction?
From our experience, we have built a relationship with the local law enforcement for a number of years. And the good thing about that is that when we have questions like that, let's say that there's ICE outside a family's home, and we need to verify that those are actually ICE agents. So the police have said, you can call us. We can go there and verify their identities. You don't have to open the door if you don't want to. If you're requesting a judicial warrant and that's not being given to you, so you don't have to open the door, but we will verify, their identities, if you call the local police. But this is on a case-by-case basis. Not every local police acts the same. And in Westchester County, we advocated for the Immigrant Protection Act and also use the Immigrant Protection Act to approach local law enforcement to have them pass any sort of ordinance or regulations that could, sort of extend that protections to the immigrant community. But those conversations, usually happen on a case-by-case basis. But I will recommend any one of you just approaching your local police and ask this question, because they are the ones who can go out and verify those identities, so then people feel at least somehow protected, that they're not going to be taken away and their family's not going to hear about them for months.
So should we be doing that? Should we be
Absolutely.
reaching out to police and asking, are you doing that? Is that what we should do?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we can ask our local law enforcement as to how they are protecting the community as a whole. And we have done, for example, podcasts with our local law enforcement to say how they are protecting not just immigrants, but the whole community. And I think that when they have that approach of protection of the entire community, nobody is being left out. People at least know that if they call local law enforcement, they're not going to call ICE on them. There won't be retaliation. They can still approach them, can still file police reports. So it's also important for the local law enforcement to continue keeping those bridges with minority groups and people who don't feel comfortable approaching law enforcement.
I think that's a really salient point and something that, a group of concerned, civic-minded humans, like what can we do? Sometimes we feel helpless. I think that building those bridges and, making yourself available to, communicate with law enforcement, understand what's going on in the community, not in an accusatory way, but in a bridge building way. Like,
Absolutely.
We have to protect these people. They deserve, we all have rights, right? And fortunately, the local police here recognize that, and they recognize, the value of community members, and the dignity of people. But when there's a conflict between a federal law enforcement official and state law enforcement official, it can be problematic. But if the federal law enforcement official isn't following the law, that's a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the engagement can come from. Like, we're not asking you, local law enforcement, to do anything that you don't have the authority to do. We want to know, what can you do when federal law enforcement oversteps? How can we protect the community? So yeah, being vocal and engaged in that way, I think, is really important.
Yes. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Jenny, and then. Okay.
I have a question about the role of private businesses. So let's just take Home Depot as an example. Are parking lots at Home Depot owned by Home Depot, and do they have the right to refuse access to ICE if they don't have a judicial warrant? I mean, we've been hearing stories, I don't know about like locally in Rochelle, if this is happening, about vans just hanging out in parking lots where day laborers will show up. So what power do they have? And if they have any power, can we put pressure on them?
Yeah, the answer to the latter question is yes, for sure. Like, you guys could be advocating for, if you get wind that local businesses are maybe not behaving in a way that you would want businesses in your community to behave, whatever pressure you could exert, for sure. As far as the substance of your question, the parking lot, that's a great question for a constitutional expert. My understanding is that they cannot enter the workplace without a warrant, unless they are given permission to enter the workplace. It's like a home. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's a sacred space. The parking lot, I'm really not sure if that extends to the parking lot or not. I suspect that it would, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
It's not owned by Home Depot. They're not owned by Home Depot. It's usually a real estate or management company that owns the parking lot.
Right. So then you would need in addition to the business owner, you'd need that real estate company to be on board, because if that's their property, then they have a reasonable expectation of privacy on their property, and they could get the same message out. Yeah.
This over there.
Two legal questions. One, does the habeas corpus applies equally to citizens and non-citizens. And second, the Secretary of State has alleged that he has the right to oppose or to block any naturalization process and decide that the person who was involved in this process should be deported. Is there a legal basis for this?
Okay, so those are two really good questions.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the first question, as I understand it, is do citizens and non-citizens alike have equal rights to habeas corpus? And the short answer to that question is yes. If you are being detained, no matter your legal status or skin color, in violation of law, you have a right to habeas corpus. Now, whether you are being detained in violation of law in many circumstances is going to be dictated by your legal status and the facts and circumstances of your individual case. So that's obviously a relevant consideration, but the answer is yes. And habeas corpus right now is the most powerful judicial tool that there is for people who are being detained. Because normally you have to go and file a bond motion in immigration court. And there are very funky decisions and notions of due process about who has the burden of proof. And the way that bond motions are adjudicated in immigration court would shock the conscience of most people. Whereas if you could get into federal court on a strong habeas case, particularly in New York, chances are you're going to get a good judge who can issue you relief. As far as the second question is, what on earth is our Secretary of State doing, and is he out of his effing mind? Is that basically the question, the legal issue? Yeah. So
legal grounds to for somebody who's not a citizen,
yeah,
to decide to have him or her
yeah.
thrown out of the country.
Right. So there is a statute that gives the Secretary of State authority to determine if someone is a threat to national security and to render that person deportable. If that person has been deemed deportable and they are issued an administrative warrant for their deportation, they could then be detained. Whether that is lawful, I mean, this is literally being adjudicated right now in the Supreme Court. I think there have been some favorable decisions, but I think recently there was a very scary and unfavorable decision where the courts have, given, I don't want to say carte blanche, but they have blessed the executive's unitary authority to make certain determinations. So one of the, not to get too far into the weeds, but one of the issues is, okay, it's clear that the secretary has this authority, but are there any checks on that authority? And my answer is that there has to be, and I think most legal scholars would agree. But what that looks like right now is one of the sort of cutting edge issues that's being litigated throughout the country. So stay tuned.
Is there anything left to the old idea of sanctuary?
So that's a really good question, and I think the answer is yes, but I also think this administration is coming hard on sanctuary communities. It's, I think, one of their top priorities. They're exerting pressure. They're exerting the pressure of the state with state-sanctioned violence. They're exerting financial pressure. They're, getting their talking heads to go on all the programs to explain how horrible these cities and jurisdictions are. I mean, it's coming from all angles. So I think this sort of harkens back to the first thing that I said is stay vigilant. This too shall pass. I believe that there is sanctuary, but if something bad happens, then you have to deal with it. but it is under attack right now.
Under attack. Let's say someone is being chased and they run into a church. And I've recently received information from a local church because we rent space.
Okay.
And what to do, and to have somebody at the door, and this is what a warrant looks like.
Yeah.
And these are the people you're supposed to call when somebody comes.
Exactly.
I didn't think that this was too serious when I first received this about 3 months ago. But now, I'm looking at the demographic of my group, that I am going to have at the door someone with a charged cell phone. And these numbers, if in case some poor soul decides to run into a church.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
Well, historically, churches have been, I mean, they are sacred places, but there have also been sensitive areas for law enforcement. One of the first things the Trump administration did was issue a memo. I think at first it might have been issued in secret. It was not supposed to be public. Basically rescinding, generations of policy that we're not going to make arrests in sensitive locations, churches, schools, courthouses. We already know, hospitals. We already know what's going on. So, but if someone makes it into a church, and I'm not advocating running from the authorities, that can end badly, but if someone makes that decision and is fortunate enough to make it inside of a church, that's still a protected space. There are, constitutional Fourth Amendment protections that get triggered, and they do not have to permit entry to a law enforcement official in the absence of a judicial warrant for that specific individual or to search that specific space.
So just to be clear, this is true, if somebody comes running to my house and they come into my house and I let them in, and ICE is following them, I don't have to let these people in unless they have a judicial warrant.
Correct.
It doesn't matter that it's not that fleeing person's house, it's my house.
It's your house.
Right.
Correct. But,
So I would think a church would be the same thing, right?
Yeah, it is. But you as a private homeowner, I mean, this administration is using increasingly aggressive tactics. And, they've charged judges. There's a judge in Wisconsin that got charged with harboring and interfering with obstruction of justice. So, I would do the same thing that you would do, I think, and say, go away unless you have a warrant. But you have to understand that you may get hit with a harboring charge. Now, my knowledge of the harboring statute, which is not deep, but my understanding is you have to have knowledge that the individual who's fleed into your house is here illegally or has broken the law so, and of course you have no knowledge of that, so I would feel very comfortable defending you or referring you to a colleague to defend you against a harboring charge. I don't think there's a realistic chance of you getting into any legal jeopardy, but you guys should be aware, we're all good Samaritans here, but it's not risk-free even for us. But I welcome stuff like that, but not everybody does.
Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question in a similar vein to those that have just been asked. If you're running a program at a school, a public school, what are your rights there in terms of, because that's not a private property, or I just don't, what would you say would be your rights there to deny ICE entry to a public school?
Yeah, I don't believe that ICE is permitted in a public school without permission to enter. I don't even think they try. I think they hang out outside. At least this week. Who knows what's going to happen next week? But I haven't heard any reports of ICE actually in a school, but they linger outside of schools. And I've seen some videos and some articles about community members mobilizing and then ICE harassing community members saying, you're obstructing a federal investigation. And people have been arrested. There have been reporters that have been arrested. There have been, community members that have been arrested.
Arrested for being present and in
Obstruction.
Yeah.
protection of those.
Yeah, I think you probably have to do something more than being there to motivate an ICE officer to do the paperwork to process your arrest. But yes.
And what I can share in terms of the schools, what we heard right now in Westchester County, but also in our local schools, that they have their own ICE policies. So as parents, we should inquire about that, what it says,
Absolutely.
what kind of protection, especially if ICE shows up and try to get inside the school, how will the school respond, in those scenarios. And as far as I know, Mamaroneck School District has their own ICE policy. So if your parents, please inquire with your local school district. And in terms of the church, we rented a space at a church for 3.5 years because of Hurricane Ida. And now we are back into a beautiful home, thank goodness. But we work very closely with Reverend Tammy to develop a nice protocol, not just for CRC that was renting the space there, but also with the St. Thomas Church, which actually added another layer of protection for our organization, because we were renting at a space that has another set of protocols that we needed to follow in case, ICE was at the church. Yes.
Do you see any movement in the country among the legal profession? I don't hear a lot of, the individuals you hear about, but as a general, we have to rely on the legal profession right now to come out and say this is just intolerable, but I don't hear, do you know if there's anything going on?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Again, one of the groups that the Trump administration came after hard was the legal profession, and they're still coming. And some have buckled, and others have stood amazingly strong. But for those of us who advocate and protect immigrants, we're not all that powerful of a legal lobby, right? So, I think that the good there are great law firms out there that have robust pro bono programs, and I think they're doing a lot. But, at the end of the day, it really, the fight has to be an individual one.
ABA, ABA taking a position?
Yeah, I don't know. And you know what? I don't think it would do a whole lot. This administration doesn't care what the ABA thinks, all the guardrails have broken down, the norms have been busted wide open. But I agree with what you said, that, we really are, the courts are supposed to protect us, and some of them do and some of them don't. And right now, with some of the decisions coming out of the Supreme Court, it's quite awful and frightening.
This isn't a question, but the American Bar Association did, I think, recently sue the Trump administration over what was going on with respect to pro bono, Skadden Arps, and the other law firms in terms of their capitulation toward the Trump administration. So that, isn't specifically responsive to what you're saying. But, I think indirectly what it does is it emboldens the legal profession to say, okay, at least we're speaking up right now, and we're not, sleep at the switch.
100%. And at the end of the day, the legal profession, they are interested in themselves first. So they make a calculation.
Right.
Is this going to help my business or hurt my business? If they take a stand that's unpopular with their staff, and I'm talking about the bigger firms here, obviously, they are. They get the benefit of being perceived as humanitarian, making a humanitarian gesture, but the cynical reality is that they're probably doing it because they're afraid of losing their staff, and they're afraid of the reputational harm that's going to come about not sticking up to the government. But whatever it takes, exactly. But it's true that some of these firms have made the opposite calculation, and they're capitulating for one reason or another. They're afraid of losing federal contracts. They're afraid of losing access. They're afraid of getting, favored treatment. But this is where we are. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of these high-profile cases where the government is so clearly overstepped, I mean, they are almost universally winning in the lower courts. But on some of these major issues that have made it up to the Supreme Court, we're already seeing, especially in the immigration context, you're seeing some of those victories being scaled back, to a frightening extent. But yeah.
I have a simple question going
Yep.
back a few points, and it's about the judicial warrant. I've read stories. I mean, if you're in your apartment and there's a knock at the door, you have to open the door to see the judicial warrant.
You do not have to open the door.
They put it under the...
You could.
Yes.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah.
Because once you open the door, that's the end.
Well, I mean, they don't have the right to break in if you haven't granted them permission, but of course they could sign an affidavit saying, yeah, she gave me permission and open the door, It's best to keep the door closed, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And what I want to say about service providers, especially legal service providers, I hear that they're exhausted. It's traumatizing what's happening in immigration court right now. So it's not just about a legal case, but it's also how taxing is defending a person right now. An immigrant person right now. And, and some of them have been arrested for trying to protect their clients getting out of immigration court. So it's the fear not just for the immigrants going through it, but also their legal representative. And this is just, when you hear judges and attorneys and then immigrants, you kind of become hopeless as to what do you rely on, to defend your case if you have one. So, what I could say is that the more support we give, the more we speak out about these things, the better informed will be everyone as to know that how hard these immigration policies, and also, as Jeffrey said, the approach, how it's, these policies are being applied, it's what really, makes your back shivers, because it's just, even for citizenship interviews, in the past, immigrants were comfortable to go to those interviews because they knew that they were going to be tested on U.S. civics and also on their past immigration experience. But now everyone is trying to lawyer up because what they don't want is that maybe being asked an appropriate question and answer inappropriately, or maybe say something wrong. There's a lot of fear right now. And also for ICE check-ins, they used to be, individuals going along, no problem, just to tell the government, I'm still here, I'm still complying with my case, I'm not going anywhere. But right now, they are afraid to go by themselves, and attorneys are already at capacity.
Yeah, I want to build on that. Two things I want to address. First, about this feeling as an advocate, being not having the bandwidth, right? So and that can, if you let that, I wrestle with this on a daily basis, and it's extremely challenging. And the way that I personally have dealt with it effectively is to just stay laser focused on your task. Try not to worry about the external factors that you cannot control. What you can control as an advocate and as a community member, whatever task you are doing at the moment, that's what you can control. And maybe you're doing a couple of more tasks in an hour than you're comfortable doing, but don't bite off more than you could chew, because then that's going to compromise the rest of your work. Focus on the task. I think that's the way to stay sane, stay diligent, and do the work that you can do and make the impact that you can make, and try not to let this external stuff that you really can't control overwhelm your task and your mission. And then on the citizenship thing, that's an important piece for those of you that might be listening out there that are legal residents and are eligible for naturalization, don't think it's just going to be an easy ride, right? Like, there are lots of cases out there where it's an easy transition from resident to citizen. Then there is a continuum of cases. If you have anything in your immigration history, even if you think it's been resolved, talk to someone that has knowledge and experience handling naturalization, that can look at your immigration history holistically and not just say, oh, you've had a green card for 5 years. Here, go ahead, you can apply for citizenship. Because even before, this administration came in, that has long been a way where people get trapped. They get trapped at their citizenship interviews because of something that wasn't quite right 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So diligence, again, like, be diligent, don't assume, and I think less and less people are assuming that it's going to be easy. But yeah, just be cautious and be diligent.
How are attorneys being arrested? What are the grounds, even if they win in a court, but under what circumstances could an attorney accompanying somebody be
obstruction of justice?
Exactly.
If you are interfering with a law enforcement operation, like, there is a very fine line between what you can do in a public space. If there is a federal official executing his or her duties, whether or not they're doing it lawfully, if they are executing their duties and you obstruct that, and that term, I mean, it used to be, I think, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but there are civil rights lawyers that will tell you that there was a sort of understanding where that line was. And if you cross that line, you could get in trouble. So now that those goalposts have moved.
So this is what's happened with Lander, and what's happened in New Jersey, et cetera. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Mr. Lander has, from what I saw, I don't want to speak out of turn, but he might have some problems,
And I guess maybe, Jeffrey, if you can talk a little bit about the alien registration program, which is a new approach.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it because, again, it's very circumstance specific. But if you are undocumented, if you are documented, chances are you're already registered. So whoever handled your case, you should have a quick conversation with that attorney and say, do I have to register? The answer is probably no. If you're undocumented, you have a very difficult decision to make, whether to come forward and comply with this. I guess I would call it a new requirement. I mean, the reality is it's been on the books for decades. It just hasn't been enforced. Now it's being enforced. And it's being enforced in a very specific way. You have to file an application online. You have to answer all kinds of questions. It may be that it's in your interest to register. It may be that it's not in your interest to register. It may be that it's in your interest to register, but exercise your constitutional rights in answering those questions. I don't know about that approach, but there are some pretty bright people on my listserv that have advocated for that approach in certain circumstances. So, it's very situational. It's case by case, and you just, again, information, knowledge is power. So you want to be armed with as much knowledge as possible about the costs and benefits of registering before you kind of put yourself out there if you're undocumented.
What was the name of
the Alien Registration Program?
Yeah, you have to file a form online. I think it's a G325R, if I'm not mistaken, and you file.
And that took effect on April 11th of this year, and a lot of people were very concerned because they feel like they have to give their information to the federal government, especially their address, any criminal background history.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of concern around that, and we're trying to advise, and the legal team is trying to advise the best they can, but at the end of the day, it's a individual's, decision.
Really, really difficult choice in certain terms. Sometimes it's a clear choice. A lot of times it's a difficult choice. For what it's worth, I've heard anecdotes about people who are starting now to appear for fingerprinting under the registration and have not been detained. But there's no question in my mind, if someone has been here for less than 2 years, they're at risk. If someone has a criminal offense, even if it's a very minor offense, if they're undocumented, they're at risk. I mean, I think every undocumented person that registers, there's a certain degree of risk, but there are reports about people appearing at their biometrics appointment and not being detained. So those people have now complied with their registration requirement. If in 2, 4, 5, 10 years they become eligible for legalization, they will not have to worry about this ridiculous requirement being used against them.
And what are the consequences if you don't register?
Well, that remains to be seen, right? One of the consequences that this administration is touting is that you could be subject to enforcement, you could be denied a future immigration benefit. But it remains to be seen.
Thank you. Gabby?
This is probably a question for both of you. You might have different takes on it. My question is about accessing legal advice when cost is an issue, and what are ways that we can support the community in getting that access? I mean, I know the CRC has programs for that, but I'm kind of curious how broad your reach is around Westchester, and what can we do to support that?
So from CRC, we have, our legal team is very small, and we rely a lot of volunteer attorneys, in which we provide training in immigration law, and at some point they are equipped to provide legal consultations. So in order for us to respond to the high demand for legal consultations, we run immigration clinics, but we also have other organizations in Westchester County, such as Neighbors Link, Catholic Charities, that have bigger legal programs, and we try to refer them to those when we don't have capacity in-house. But now what we're doing, and we haven't done before, is that every month we're scheduling a immigration clinic and a couple of Know Your Rights sessions, because the law is also changing every month. I mean, every week, I don't know. So I lost track of how much. It's honestly, and that is the overwhelming part of it.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's like you have to listen to the news and understand when there are laws that are changing, but the reality is the laws themselves haven't really changed that much. It's how the laws are being applied, and that often has even more impact than a change in a law, which might affect a very small number of people, whereas a change in how the laws that are on the books, how that's applied, is going to affect a much broader population.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And yes, and the approach is so important. For example, I mean, 2 weeks ago, the president came out saying that, for example, farm workers, are sort of protected now. And so we don't know at this point who, I'm sorry? I thought you were talking.
Change.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that is the overwhelming part of it, that you can keep up with all of these updates. And so we decided to run at least 2 Know Your Rights per month in order to keep people updated and informed. And if we have capacity to do another immigration clinic, for example, in the same month, then we do it. But right now, it's hard. But we're trying to still refer them to maybe private law firms that we already have a connection with, and maybe get a consultation for a low bono, fee. So it's a lot going on right now. It is a big challenge just to have access to legal consultation.
And access is really, it's really all about, just historically, there are statistics out there that the rate of success for someone in a deportation case is dependent largely on whether they have a lawyer and who their judge is. It's not their case. The facts. It's really quite striking, particularly like, I guess, you know, most of us would say, yeah, sure, if someone has a good lawyer, they're going to have a better chance of being successful. But you wouldn't think that within a given jurisdiction, and pick any jurisdiction in the country, but especially a jurisdiction like New York, where there are dozens of immigration judges. There's Syracuse University has a database called TRACK, and they track grant rates from judges. They do it strictly on asylum cases, but you could get a sense of a judge and their inclinations, and you know, based on, you know, how they adjudicate asylum cases. And within the same jurisdiction, you have judges who have a grant rate of 5% to 95%,
Wow.
and everything in between. It's quite shocking. Yeah.
Observation, we're going to need to wrap pretty soon.
Sure.
And an observation and then a question for how people can leave here, because we're very interested in sort of bridging in the community. You brought up about farmers a minute ago, and the administration recognized amazingly that, wow, there are people who aren't, you know, citizens of this country that actually harvest our crops. And if they're not there to harvest our crops, that possibly we won't have food in our supermarkets. And then there's the hotel industry. And it occurs to me that we, as citizens who want to eat and support our neighbors, could actually write letters to the editor and do other things, recognizing statistically. And then you have people talking about all the unfilled jobs in this country that maybe citizens don't want to fill. So these are things that citizens can do. You know, what do we want to walk out of here with? But what do you recommend to us as your neighbors that would be helpful to the people who are in the community that use your services? You did mention that we can reach out to law enforcement. What else might we be able to do to walk out of here with the sense that we're actually helping to preserve and protect our community?
Yes, I think it depends on the level of engagement. For example, there are some people who come to us and say, oh, I can offer my house if somebody needs to hire. I mean, it's that, you know, a person who maybe feels confident and know their rights, and then they're willing to do these things. But it is, you know, a spectrum. For example, in terms of the soft actions that we usually ask our volunteers is that if you want to volunteer to accompany a person to a nice check-in, you don't have to intervene if the person, you know, is being detained. You just have to observe and take notes. And if you feel comfortable, just record with your phone. So then if that person, you know, their rights got violated while they were detaining, you know, him or her, then the person can provide the footage of how it happened, you know, as an evidence to support their case. So being an observant and taking notes or filming, it's crucial right now, because the way that these ICE detentions are presented are always from the lens of, no, you know, this is our right to do it, we're doing it the right way, you know, we need to deport as many, you know, they call them illegals and criminals, but that is not usually the case. So if people want to volunteer, for example, to accompany someone to a court, you know, here it could be immigration, could be traffic, could be anything, that moral support right now, it's so key. So I would say connect with either the CRC, and Nicole is going to talk to us a little bit more about it, or connect with your local organization. And if you want to know how your local government is reacting to this, is addressing these issues, then, you know, have a conversation with your local trustee, with your mayor, as to what do you think about what's going on? How is our community in terms of being prepared in case ICE comes here? You know, those are real conversations, and I think that if you get answers excellent, and then share those answers with community organizations or other people, or maybe just write an op-ed, for example. If you are observing and feel a certain way about how detentions are going on and how the government is approaching immigrants, you can write an opinion about it. I think right now, because of all the fear, there's a lot of silence. Everyone is scared to say something publicly for the fear of retaliation. And even nonprofit organizations. Now we are sort of careful as to how do we serve, how do we, put our news media.
Right grants, the language we use for grants with the federal government now and New York State are just all challenges for us.
Exactly. So it's important to, if you observe something, you feel a certain way about what's happening right now, write an opinion. We can definitely send it to editors to try to make it published. The important thing here is not just immigrants raising their voices, but also their supporters, their allies, people who really value their contributions, as you said, right? Right now, food is, becoming more expensive. The farmers don't want to show up at the farms, to harvest food. So there is a trickle-in effect when we, try to go after immigrants, that the economy, will suffer, and all of us will suffer with it. But I want to pass it on to Nicole to continue talking about.
Just really quick, I just wanted to let you all know, we do have various opportunities from, just one-off opportunities to be with people or ongoing opportunities to volunteer with us. You can find all the information on our website, crcny.org. We do rely on volunteers and donations to keep us going, even, from a funding perspective. It is difficult out there with some grant language and just certain opinions. And as Janet said, I think one of the simplest things everyone can do as they walk out of here is just share these stories that Jeff and Janet shared. Talk to your neighbors. I think just awareness, making people aware, and even being just ambassadors for us, and telling people CRC exists, whether it's to an immigrant or low income that might need help, or to one of your friends, just letting them know that we exist and they can volunteer with us too.
Yeah, and that's I would add, of course, the CRC in our community, but what people could do is find out who the people are, where these nonprofits are, what in a given community, what kind of work they're doing, and find out how to support them. Local churches, their allies. I'm sure that they have programs that help people. So yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to say that the National League of Women Voters is really focused on this moment, because there are a lot of anti-democracy things that are going on. And they are encouraging everybody, whether you're a league member or not, get out there, do something, whether it's write a letter to the editor, expressing that you're appalled about what's going on, whether it's demonstrating or protesting in the street. We have 3 going on every weekend. Boston Post Road at Harbor Island at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Saturday morning on Chatsworth Avenue at the bridge right by the farmers market. That's at 11 o'clock Saturday morning. And then Sunday morning, 12 o'clock on Chatsworth Avenue at the CVS parking lot. Get out there in numbers. It's important. Another important thing is writing postcards. Indivisible has organized that beautifully. That's an important thing. Anything you do, for pro-democracy is important.
We're losing the messaging battle, which is really key. So if you're out there, it's great that you're out there, but give some thought, write something clever on a card. Be focused on something that's appalling. Not just say, this is appalling. What's appalling, right? Like, have a message and deliver it in a clever and affirmative way.
I read one today, just say no to negativity.
That's a good one.
Right. Yeah. I like e pluribus unum.
Do we really need masked ICE agents in our neighborhood? I mean, come on. Like, where are we living? Like, what's happening to our country?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And
we will follow up.
I want to thank you, Jeffrey. This has been great, and I want to thank the CRC and Janet and everybody for this very educational program this evening.
Thank you.